Hey there, friend. If you feel bright-eyed and bushy-tailed every morning when you wake up and manage to get through the afternoon without any kind of slump in energy, this episode is absolutely not for you. If, however, you wake up bleary and you are struggling to get out of bed in the morning without hitting snooze once, twice, maybe a few more times than that, and you really wished you had a pot of coffee already going on your bedside table, stay tuned because this episode is precisely for you. Today, we're going to talk all things energy and fatigue, how to maximize your energy and minimize your fatigue. So stay tuned. Welcome to Human Design with Dr. Catherine Hoffman, where we blend the best of the scientific and esoteric to help you tune into your own internal wisdom so that you can live the life your soul is craving. Hey there, I am Dr. Catherine, a naturopathic physician who loves to see the magic that happens when folks are able to relax into who they really are rather than suffering trying to live up to being who the world told them that they should be. If you'd like to experience that magic for yourself, you are absolutely in the right spot. Let's get started. Now, before we get started, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Like I said, today we're talking about fatigue. If you are new around here, if you are not familiar, hey there, I am Dr. Catherine Hoffman. I'm a naturopathic doctor and I specialize in mental health. I end up seeing a lot of folks who are very tired for all kinds of reasons. Most of the folks I see do have fatigue from a mental health complaint. So that can be depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, you name it. And I also see a fair few folks who have had all the tests done. They don't necessarily fit the criteria for a mental health disorder or a mood disorder, but they're tired and they don't know why. And so we will look at their tests and there may not be anything there that is obvious as a cause of their fatigue, but we have to work through, okay, well, you're feeling so tired, there's something going on here. And so what do we do about it? And so what I'm going to do today is walk you through what are the conversations that I'm having with folks and how do I approach fatigue as a naturopathic doctor who works with folks who just are so tired as they're trying to move through their life. So the way that I conceptualize of fatigue in general is that there are two types overall. The first type is what I call normal fatigue, and this is your day-to-day feeling tired because you did the day and you used your energy up, and now it's time to go to bed so that you can rest and get ready for the next day. Another place where fatigue, I think, is totally normal is if you're having an acute infection or if you've had some sort of injury. These are times where it's totally appropriate for you to be super tired because your body is doing a ton of work trying to get everything back where it needs to be to fight off the infection and to really get you back, get you to being healthy again and back in working order. So that's the normal side of fatigue. Then there is the, quote, abnormal or more pathological side of fatigue, where there's something else going on that we really need to address and work with and support the body and the mind through. So an acute infection can become chronic, and you may still have these symptoms of fatigue. Thyroid disorder, very common to experience fatigue with hypothyroid. This is part of how we know that this is what's going on. And a blood test would tell us whether or not this was happening. Similarly, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, including B vitamin deficiency and iron deficiency, are common reasons why folks get tired. Again, simple blood tests let us know if this is what's going on, and then we can add those nutrients back in, and it 9 times out of 10 helps with that fatigue and evens out energy levels. Blood sugar dysregulation as well, chronic pain, and then we get to more, quote, functional illnesses like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, where we can't necessarily look at a lab test and say, oh, this is what you have going on and this is why you're tired. But as we talk to someone, as we hear more about their story and their symptoms and what they're experiencing, we can see that, okay, you have this group of symptoms that go together in what we call chronic fatigue or in what we call fibromyalgia and other types of illnesses like this. Like I said earlier, mood disorders, mental health concerns can make people very tired for any number of reasons. Part of which is that folks who have depression, anxiety, etc., tend to run through their nutrients and their micronutrients much quicker. So they tend to need more B vitamins, for example, than somebody who doesn't experience these mental health concerns. There can also be insomnia for any number of reasons, which of course makes you tired. And there can be hormone imbalances. And after a traumatic experience, whether or not there's a physical injury, if there's some sort of emotional trauma, be it a loss or witnessing something that is, violent and traumatic, of course, this causes fatigue for potentially a fairly long period of time. And so this is not an exhaustive list at all. There are probably many more reasons why folks may experience chronic fatigue or feel very tired for a long period of time. But this is the list as I was thinking about, okay, what conversations am I having with folks? These are the things that come up the most. And so I thought I would bring all of those up. What we hear in the media are a few phrases that point us back to these kinds of causes of fatigue. So you might have heard the phrase mitochondrial dysfunction, and you might have heard the phrase cortisol dysregulation. And what these phrases are doing, to my mind, is pointing us back to the fact that the human body is very complicated. There's a lot that goes in to being a human and to having all of the physiology and the metabolic processes and the chemical reactions that all need to happen to having that work. It's a lot. It's very complicated. And so saying something like mitochondrial dysfunction or cortisol dysregulation, are those things happening? Sure, potentially. I'm not fighting that. And I think on a broader context, it mostly is pointing us back to the fact that it's complicated and everything feeds in onto everything. So it can be difficult to really pin down like what is the fatigue here and what's causing it in some folks. A caveat before we go on any further is that nothing in this video is to be taken as medical advice. Of course, please work with a local qualified and licensed healthcare provider so that you can get the care that you need and a really individualized treatment plan. What I'm sharing here is from my clinical experience and my training as a naturopathic doctor, but everybody's different, and I don't, without knowing you or seeing you or having any sense of what's going on with your particular case, nothing in here can be considered medical advice. So work with somebody who's qualified in your area. Now, what I want to walk you through is a 4-step process or framework rather that I use with folks as we are working through their fatigue. And as I develop treatment plans together with my patients. I don't necessarily always tell them what to do. I give them my expertise and they get to decide what they want to do or what they don't want to do. But this is sort of the general process that I'm talking through with folks as we go. So these pieces are one, framing fatigue and sort of getting your head around it and making sense of it in a way that serves you, that makes space for possibility, as opposed to sort of crushing your spirit with the thought that like, gosh, I'm always tired. There's nothing I can ever do about this. And, I'm never going to be the person I want to be or have the life I want to have. The second piece is understanding your specific system. How does your body work? How does your mind work? How does fatigue show up for you specifically? You're the only person who lives in your body. And so you need to really understand how your body shows up and how fatigue manifests in your specific system. The third piece is minimizing insults to your system. And then the fourth piece that goes along with that is building the body back up and giving it what it needs so that it can have the energy to do all the things that it needs to do. So let's walk through these things one by one. The first piece is to frame it, framing fatigue. Our bodies are so wise, and this may not sit well with everyone, and I understand why, but let me say how I frame it, and then we'll talk about why this is more complicated than it sounds at face value. So your body is so wise. Your body's one and only job is to keep you alive and safe. That's the point of your body, is to keep you alive and safe and surviving from one moment to the next moment to the next moment. Every symptom that comes up is a result of your body trying to keep you alive and safe. Are there exceptions to this? Yes, the most notable to my mind are things like developmental disabilities, or something happens in utero where, it's complicated to grow a human, and sometimes parts of this process don't happen the way that they should. And so sometimes this results in loss of pregnancy. And sometimes this results in folks having some sort of disability for the rest of their lifetime. And so that is the main place where I think that this goes sideways, where it's not necessarily, your body isn't, it just gets more complicated than what I'm making out to be. But this isn't the place to necessarily dive into all those complications. I say that mostly to make you aware of the fact that I am aware that it's not always as cut and dry as I make it sound. And for many of us, as we go through life, we tend to neglect or downplay our fatigue as just a nuisance, or downplay our experience as, our body is fighting against us, or there's something that's gone horribly wrong and our body, is trying to kill us from the inside out. Folks who have autoimmune disorders, this is language that is commonly used, understandably, 100%. And when it comes to fatigue, I am of the firm mind that your body is really trying to keep you alive and safe. And so if we have that mindset, what does that tell us about why you're feeling tired? Well, that tells us that your body needs something that it's not getting. That can be sleep, that can be nutrients, that can be creative stimulation, that can be connection with, like, social connection with other people, that can be movement, that can be any number of things. But fatigue points us back to the fact that there's something missing that we need to support ourselves and to bolster ourselves, and to be able to do life. So that's the first piece, is really framing it and making sense of it. There may be other ways that you want to frame fatigue. If you are someone who has, for example, an autoimmune disorder, and you're like, yeah, it doesn't work for me, cool. I encourage you to really explore different stories that you can tell yourself about why are you tired, and stories that don't shut down possibility. So we tend to, as humans, our natural tendency is to go into these stories about how awful things are and how it's never going to work out, and sort of this like doom and gloom snowball starts to go. And I understand that, and it makes total sense. And I encourage you to consider, well, what are some other thoughts that you might have? What are some other, even just neutral thoughts about, this is what's happening, this is how my body is working today? Okay, cool. That's better than, or more, that's an easier story to live in than telling yourself that your body is fighting you and you're never going to be a functioning member of society, et cetera, et cetera. And I share this as someone who has lived with fatigue for all of my life. And I've been on both sides of this coin, and I've told myself the stories that I'm never going to function. I'm never going to be able to be the person that I want to be. And I've also shifted into the stories about, okay, well, this is my experience for today. So I'm just going to work with that. And shifting into the story about, what is my body telling me? What do I need to do to support myself right now? And so my purpose here is just to encourage you to think about how you're thinking about your experience when it comes to energy and fatigue. So that's that. The second piece of the system that I talk with folks about is, what does fatigue look like for you? Because I guarantee the way that you experience tiredness and fatigue is not the way that I experience tiredness and fatigue. And beyond that, the way that you experience fatigue on one day may be completely different than how it shows up on another day. So, for example, there are certain days where I have fatigue where it just feels like my body is made out of lead and I cannot get up. I cannot get off the couch. Any kind of movement feels like work. There are other days where fatigue feels just like right in my eyes and like right behind my eyes. And it feels like I have trouble like visually focusing on what's in front of me, and my thoughts feel like loopy and kind of like oatmeal trying to get through a sieve, where it's just like, it won't go. And I can't seem to figure out like how to make them move. And so on different days, what does that look like for you? How does fatigue show up physically in your body? So, another way of thinking of this is that mental fatigue may look very different from physical fatigue, which may feel very different from emotional fatigue, which may feel very, very different from fatigue that comes from depression or anxiety or other mental health issues or chronic pain, et cetera, et cetera. So, pay attention to what are the different kinds of fatigue. I think we have a tendency to think that, oh my gosh, I'm so tired and I'm always so tired and it's never going to be different. But if you start paying attention, you will probably notice that there's variance and that there's some nuance there. This can also help to open up how you're thinking about your energy levels and your fatigue. If you notice, oh my gosh, on Saturday I have all the energy in the world. On Sunday afternoons, I feel drained because I'm anxious about the week ahead. Okay, that's great information. Then you can start to work with that and move forward with that information. Another question to ask yourself or to reflect on is if we're considering that, or if you're playing with the idea that fatigue is your body telling you that it needs something or that it's missing something, what does it need in any given moment? Another way that I might think about this is because I think that we're very accustomed to turning to distraction when we're tired because, like, oh, well, I shouldn't really be sleeping. And it feels like doing something to be scrolling or to be reading or to be watching something. And so you may also ask yourself, if I take away all this distraction, if I don't look at social, if I don't turn on, a TV show or a movie, if I don't look at the news, what's left? What am I left with here? And sit with that and see what comes up. You may be really surprised. I think a lot of times we think, oh my gosh, I'm so tired and fatigued, and like there's nothing that's going to make this go away. But if you stop in the silence for just a few minutes, what's there? What is your body telling you that it needs? 9.9 times out of 10, when folks do this, they come out with some really powerful insights that can be very transformative and helpful. So I encourage you to ask yourself, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling fatigued, if you take away all of the distractions, what's left? Another question that goes along with this is, we think about rest. A lot of folks just think about taking a nap or going to bed. There's different kinds of rest. There's active rest and passive rest. So active rest, I think of as doing something creative, listening to music, talking with a friend, talking with your spouse, playing with your kids, this kinds of things can all be considered active rest. Passive rest is more, vegging out in front of the TV, taking a nap, going to sleep, et cetera, et cetera. It's worth considering and playing with if you're experiencing, maybe you're experiencing mental fatigue from being at work all day. Well, is your system, would it really benefit from going to sleep, or would it really benefit from an unstructured walk where you didn't bring any sort of electronic device with you? Would it really benefit from vegging out in front of the TV, or from having a nice conversation and like connecting with your partner, your spouse, or your kids? I'm not here to tell you. I'm just here to say, consider that, think about it. What are different options that might be helpful for you? And it will be different based on the type of fatigue that you're experiencing. And so that's why you have to understand how these different kinds of fatigue look for your specific system. Another question that's worth asking yourself is, how do you know when how do you know what kind of bandwidth you have on any given day? And how do you know when it's getting low? And so the reason I ask this question is because if you are someone who is highly sensitive, or if you're someone who has sensory sensitivities and whatnot, this is a very common conversation. It can be very difficult for folks to come to terms with, myself included. So I encourage you to pay attention to, if you're with a certain person, does that person make you feel energized, or do they make you feel drained after you're with them? How do you know? How do you know that that's true? How do those two sensations differ in your body? At the same time, if there's a certain activity that you do you feel drained after or not so much? If there are different environments, do you enjoy being there or not so much? These are all things that are addressed also in human design. And so if you want to look at that in your virtual reading, I encourage you to do so, because environments are addressed and how like the energetics of your system is addressed. And so you can take a look at that. But just in your lived experience, you can get a lot of this information and make sense of, well, how do I know if I'm getting low? Like, are you somebody who gets hangry? If you go to a party for half an hour, maybe you're fine. But when you get that 45-minute to an hour mark, you start to know like, oh, like it's time for me to go. How do you know that? Or on the other side of things, if you're an extrovert who really needs that stimulation, how do you know, like, I can work at home 1 or 2 days a week, but the other 3 days I really need to be in the world around people, talking to people, getting that external stimulation so that I can really do excellent work and like get my energy jazzed. So, pay attention to your own system and how these different inputs affect your energy levels. So we talked about framing your fatigue and how to sort of conceptualize it, and the fact that how you think about it is going to make a difference of how you experience your energy levels and fatigue. We also talked about understanding your unique system and the fact that the way that I experience fatigue is going to be different from the way that you experience fatigue, and the different types of fatigue that you experience are going to be different. And so the more in tune with that you can be, and the more in touch with your body you can be, and the more you can reflect on these questions, the better able you will be to make sense of what's showing up, and then what do you do about it? The third part here is minimizing insults to your system. So, yes, you may know what fatigue feels like. Yes, you may have a way of conceptualizing it that makes sense for you and that makes a little bit of room for possibility. And then how are you taking care of yourself? How are you making sure that you're not piling so much extra stuff onto yourself that the first two sections don't even matter? I do, of course, understand that these next two parts of minimizing insults to your system and building yourself back up, it takes some effort and it takes some time and it takes some intention. Totally aware of that. And it's worth doing and worth exploring. It's also true that you don't have to do all of the things at once. You don't have to be perfect from here on out. It's just a matter of exploring and then being able to make informed decisions about where you're willing to make some compromises and where you're not willing to make compromises. And so the more you know, the more you practice, the more you experiment, the more you try, the more informed decisions you can make, and the more empowered you will be to be able to make good decisions for yourself. So, in terms of minimizing insults to your system, what I mean by this is to really be cognizant of the things that sap your energy and to don't do those things or to do them less. So I'm talking about things like drinking alcohol. We know alcohol saps, not saps, but when you drink alcohol, your body has to run through a lot of B vitamins in order to process that. And so folks who are habitual heavy drinkers have low vitamin B, which then causes a whole host of other problems, including cognitive disorders over the long term in very severe cases. And so avoiding alcohol is a really good way to set yourself up to have more energy. Setting boundaries. This isn't necessarily something that shows up a whole heck of a lot in sort of the health circles, but setting boundaries is so important. There's a clip going around on social media of Gabrielle Union, I think it is. And she's asked, like, what are your anti-aging tips? And she says, water and boundaries. Nothing will age you faster than not setting good boundaries. And I think that's so brilliant and true, because if you're not setting boundaries, your energy is getting sapped out by all kinds of things and people and places that, you might not want to be allocating your energy to. And so be aware if something comes up and you're like, ugh, I don't want to do this, say no. Say no. It's okay. You can also check out Artful Boundaries for more information and tools about how to be able to set boundaries and say no, particularly if you are someone who is a recovering people pleaser. If there are spaces where you want to say no, but you don't know how, It's a really good resource. So check that out. It was linked down below. And of course, like I just said, if there are things that drain you, don't do them. Don't do them. It's fine. Some stuff we need to do, like wash your dishes, wash your clothes, beyond the essentials of day-to-day life, if it doesn't have to happen, it doesn't have to happen. And there is an image I really love, and the name of the book is escaping me where I first read it. But I'll find it and link it down below, is that, particularly as women, we're taught that like, oh, we have to like be juggling all the balls all at once. Well, you also have to recognize that some of the balls you're juggling are plastic and some of them are glass. The plastic ones can fall. It's fine. It's fine. Let them fall. The glass ones, yeah, keep those up. Pay attention to those. It's also worth potentially thinking about the fact that you don't get a gold star for doing everything all at once. And so the pace that the world has told you is correct may not be the pace that you're really designed to go at. And that's okay. If you do laundry every 2 weeks instead of every week, it's fine, provided you have enough clothes, right? And so playing with the pace of your life can be so helpful as you go. And I'm sort of digressing here for a moment, but utilizing the resources that are available to you to give yourself room and to give yourself space. Are there places where you can ask for help, for one? And are there places where you are telling yourself that you need to be going so much faster than you actually do? Notice those, pay attention to them, and see if you can be aware of that thought. And as it comes up, as it shows up, and as you think, gosh, I have to be doing X, Y, and Z, do I have to be doing that? Probably the answer is no. There's a lot of urgency and like this 24-hour news cycle and social media, and there's a lot of external pressure of like, go, 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 do, make it bigger, better, stronger now. But do we need to do that? I don't know. I don't think so, but I encourage you to ask that question for yourself and see what comes through. So those are the first three pieces: framing it, understanding your own system, and then minimizing insults to your system. In addition to alcohol, processed foods fall into this category as well. But we'll talk about that in just a moment, because the fourth piece here is building yourself back up. How do you, if you're aware of your system and you're aware of how fatigue feels in your body, how do you then support your body and give it what it needs? And what does it actually need? And so how do you make sense of this? This piece I divide up into 5 different pillars, I guess, for lack of a better term. This is food, sleep, movement, medication, depending, and extra like nutritional support. You can add a lot of things into this section about building yourself back up. So therapy, meditation, creative pursuits, what have you. All of these things can go into this section. I have kept it shorter, just for purposes of time and what we're about today. But certainly as you're going through, and if you're asking yourself, well, what does my body need? And there's something that comes up that you don't hear me say today, awesome, go do it, enjoy. But the first thing is food. We have to eat, and we need to eat food that is nourishing. Again, this gets complicated with some chronic illnesses and with different types of digestive manifestations of different illnesses. And so this is why you also should be seeing somebody who is local, who can talk with you and learn more about your specific case, because obviously if you're not digesting well, it doesn't matter what you eat. In some ways, in other ways, it really does matter what you eat, but working with somebody who can help you repair the gut will make a big difference. But gut issues notwithstanding, making sure that you're getting really nutrient-dense foods. If you remember when we were talking about the causes of sort of the more, quote, pathological fatigue or the more abnormal fatigue, nutrient deficiencies are part of this. So your B vitamin deficiencies, your iron deficiencies, magnesium, all of these different vitamins and minerals, plus so many more, zinc and copper and all different kinds of things. if you don't have them in your body and your body can't make them, your body is just sort of chugging along trying to figure out, well, what do we do? If we don't have this, so we don't know what to do here. It's like if you're on a factory line and you're missing, say you're making cars and you don't have spark plugs, well, how are you going to start the car? You're not, like, you need those. So you have to be eating the things that your body needs in order to function well. If you are someone who experiences fatigue and has for a long time, I do like the Walls protocol. And she has a book out. This is a woman who, I think she was a physician, and she has multiple sclerosis, or MS. And I believe it's been a while since I read that book, but she ended up in a wheelchair and was really struggling to be able to do her job because she was so tired and just, she couldn't be up and moving and working. And so she was like, okay, well, I'm a scientist, so how do I figure this out? And so she went through and developed this protocol that helped her to heal her multiple sclerosis. And the highlights of it, again, if this sounds intriguing to you, I encourage you go check out the book. I'll link it below in the show notes. But it's like 8 cups of leafy greens per day, plus some other number of like vegetables. And then she encourages that folks eat meat, which I do as well, because the bioavailability of nutrients in meat is so much higher than in vegetables or legumes, what have you. So for example, for iron, if you eat meat, your body is going to be able to absorb that. That's what bioavailable means. It means that it's available for your body to take in and use. So the bioavailability of iron in meat sources is so much higher than the availability of iron in like spinach or other leafy greens. And so if folks are very fatigued, I do recommend that they eat meat. And I'm not saying you need to be a carnivore. I am saying that having that in your diet throughout the week is very, very helpful because it helps to build up those nutrient stores. Something else that I have recommended to folks is something called Buehler's broth, which you can find the link to below for a recipe to that. But it's essentially you make a broth out of a whole bunch of vegetables, and then you blend it up and drink it. And this is a way of helping, you're sort of pre-digesting these things. And so when you eat it, it's much easier for the body to absorb it. So, making sure you're getting good foods. I also tell folks to emphasize protein and fiber content, making sure you're getting enough protein in your diet. If you're not getting enough protein, a whole bunch of stuff starts to sort of fall apart isn't the word, but a whole bunch of other processes are compromised. So much of it, like, we just need more protein than most of us are getting. And so I encourage you to let go of some of the conversations that are happening in the popular media around fat and carbohydrates and this and that. Just make sure you're getting enough protein and let the other pieces fall into place, which is my very unscientific recommendation. But, and then with that, emphasizing fiber, because that is, your vegetables and your leafy greens and all of that. Depending on somebody's situation, I might recommend they add in a multi-mineral supplement or a multivitamin supplement. Again, depending on the individual, this is not for everyone, but for some folks, it's tremendously helpful. And then in terms of sourcing foods, this can get complicated because if you're tired, you're like, I don't want to cook because I'm so tired, but I have to cook to get the nutrition that I need. And so what do? Well, there's a couple ways around it. One is get the highest quality processed food that you can afford. So like soup, stews, what have you. You can get a lot of frozen foods, pre-prepared foods. Just opt for the highest quality ones that you can afford that are going to give you a really good nutritional bang for your buck. And if you are able to cook, or the other thing I would say before I get there is there are so many meal prep services available now. And there are also so many, services that deliver pre-cooked meals that are very nutritious and nutrient dense. And so if you're in a place to be able to afford those, I would go explore them and see what might work, because my goodness, like, such a simple solution. If you're not in a position to be able to do those, Meal prepping at the beginning of the week can be very helpful. Enlisting support of different folks in your household if you live with other people, and dividing up tasks in that way can also be very helpful. I am not someone to shame anyone about the foods that they are or are not eating. And so if you are unable to afford, clean foods, which is a silly term, but if you're unable to afford like all organic, grass-fed, beef, what have you, that's fine. Whatever you can afford, go for that. And the last thing I'll say here is that if there are traditional foods that are part of your family, enjoy these. Our genetics and our food choices of our ancestors and our genetics sort of evolved hand in hand. And so I encourage you, if there are traditional foods that you enjoy, and eat them and enjoy them. So that's about food. The second piece is sleep. And the fact of the matter is that you need more than 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep. Hate to break it to you, but it's true. There's a very, 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 very small percentage of the population who can get away with, less sleep, maybe 5 or 6 hours. Most people, you are most people, need 8, 9, even 10 hours of sleep, depending on how your nervous system is. If you've been tired for a long time, you may need more sleep for a while. It's okay. Don't judge yourself for it. Don't let anybody else judge you for it. If you are someone who is right now needing like 12 hours of sleep, as much as you can, let yourself have that space. Give yourself the opportunity to sleep as much as you feel like you need. It is not like this forever, and it may go through seasons. You may go through seasons like the winter where you're legit sleeping like 12 hours a night. Spring comes, the sun starts to come back, and you're like, oh, sweet, I only need 9 hours or 10 hours. It's okay to trust that. Sleeping is not bad. Resting is not bad. It doesn't make you less than. It doesn't make you, incompetent. It doesn't make you an unproductive member of society. It simply means that you're human and you are paying attention to what your body needs and giving your body what it needs, which is sleep. So make sure that you're getting sleep. Of course, keeping a schedule with some regularity as much as you can, getting to bed within about an hour, the same hour or so on 7 nights a week as much as you can, and getting up around the same time as much as you can. What this does is it helps your body stay in a circadian rhythm. To help with this, you can also make sure that you're getting sunlight as early as you possibly can in the day. So opening up windows, stepping outside, going for a walk, however you can get natural daylight, doesn't matter if it's cloudy, but getting natural daylight into your eyes as early as possible helps to sync your circadian rhythm, which helps to modulate that, cortisol, melatonin rhythm that we are in on a day-to-day basis. Alongside that, not looking at screens within about an hour to 2 hours before bed is tremendously helpful. If you are looking at screens, making sure that you're not looking at content that is activating, by which I mean to say that you're not looking at social media or the news or, things that are stressful, that you're like, oh, that you find yourself, oh, I was tired, but now I'm scrolling and I'm like waking up and I feel like I need to be paying attention to this. Don't look at those things. Watching calm movies as opposed to watching action films in the evening, et cetera, et cetera. So as much as you can, guard your sleep and prioritize it. Without sleep, nothing else is going to happen throughout the day as you want it to happen. I promise you. Along with this, making sure that you are moving on a regular basis. If you are fatigued, you might be saying, Catherine, you are insane. I am so tired. I cannot move. And to that I say, yes, I hear you. I have been there myself and I get it. Truly, I get it. And if you can do a little bit, it will help. Getting out for a walk, like a walk around your yard or just a walk down the street. In general, how do I say this? The point is to move some every day, but not to the point of exhaustion. And this is going to look different for everyone. So whereas One person may be able to, walk down their street and walk back to their house. Somebody else may be able to do 5 miles and feel fine. But the point is really just to move, not to the point of exhaustion, but to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I'm okay. This is good. And then, going back to resting or going back to your work day or whatever it is, your family, etc. Um, I also encourage you to do what you enjoy. If you are someone who thinks about going for a walk and you're like, ugh, no, if one more person tells me to go for a walk, I swear I'm going to scream. Don't go for a walk. Like, do you like to dance? Do you like to swim? Do you like to bike ride? Whatever it is, go do that. Yoga, Pilates, I don't know, insert activity here. So do what you enjoy, but do a little bit of it on 6 days a week at least. Um, the reason why this is important is because, one, it helps with blood flow throughout the body. It also helps the brain. So it helps the body produce a compound called BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this supports the nervous system and supports mood and, concentration and cognition, and all of these different things. It also helps mitochondrial density in the muscles, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are not accustomed to moving at all, you don't need to do a lot to see some benefit. But all of us should be moving on a daily basis. The fourth piece, and this is with a caveat, of course, that you need to be talking to a licensed provider, but sometimes I will recommend medications to folks. Again, particularly because the population of patients that I work with are dealing with mental health complaints. And so we talk a lot about medications and when is it appropriate to add in medications and when is it not appropriate to add in medications, and how do we make these decisions about, do we want to add something else to this? Do we want to take something away? Do we want to, where do we want to go next? And so the conversations that I usually end up having with my patients is, well, if you're feeling exhausted and it's, we have a sense that the root of this is because of a mental health condition or another medical condition, and the fact that you're so fatigued is really impairing you from being able to do the things that you want to be able to do, or the things that you need to be able to do to get your energy back, like cooking nutritious food, or getting to sleep, or getting out to move, or getting sun in your eyes on a regular basis, or daylight in your eyes on a regular basis, then we should probably add in a medication so that we can get your energy at least up enough so you can start to implement some of these foundations. And then your energy will start to come back and back and back as you add in these really supportive lifestyle aspects and habits. And then we can reassess, okay, do we want to stick with the med? Do you want to take it away, adjust the dose, whatever it is. I also talk with folks about sleeping medications, as we were talking about sleep earlier. And this also varies really widely. So when I work with folks who are having nightmares because they have a history of trauma, we talk about, okay, well, you need to be sleeping, and not sleeping is an issue. And so do we want to start a medication? And for a lot of these folks, yeah, for sure, because they just need to sleep. They just need 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep, because right now they're getting 3 or 4 because they're waking up and they're afraid and their body is still living in that state of trauma. There are other therapies, of course, that should come on board, like somatic therapies or EMDR, etc. But my role in their treatment is using, medications or other lifestyle supports to help them through. So these are places where I talk about medications with folks. I encourage you, if you are working with someone, it's very helpful to be transparent about what your concerns are and what your, both about having medication or not having a medication. Ask about how long they expect treatment to be. Ask about what kind of dose they expect. Ask about side effects. Ask all these different kinds of questions. A good provider will sit with you and walk you through the answers to all of your questions. Absolutely, hands down. Also, a good provider will not shame you for any decision that you want to make at all. So that's my 2 cents about medications. I don't think they're always necessary, but I think in the right place with the right person, it can be a tremendous help. I can't tell you how many folks I talk to who are like, oh yeah, I'm not drinking as much alcohol, or I'm not smoking cigarettes anymore, or yeah, like I can finally cook my own meals and like I'm interested in baking again. And I feel like, you know, these active rest habits are coming back to them because we started medications. Um, so at any rate, that's my 2 cents, 10 cents more like, but there's that. And the last piece I'll add in is adding some extra support, not necessarily medications, but as supplements. So B vitamins for sure are tremendously helpful, like I said. Magnesium is something else they add in for a lot of folks, particularly if they have chronic pain or muscle tension or pain. We're always talking about magnesium. There are different forms of magnesium. So magnesium bisglycinate is the form that I most frequently recommend to folks because it's pretty well absorbed in the body and it's less likely to cause diarrhea, which can happen with like magnesium citrate and these kinds of forms of magnesium. Alternatively, you can do Epsom salt baths, and then you'll get that magnesium like transdermally through the skin. It will be absorbed. Also adding in adaptogenic herbs. So Siberian ginseng, which is Eleutherococcus senticosus, ashwagandha, schizandra. There are a ton of different herbs out there and herbal formulations that are available that are so, so helpful and gentle to support the body, like the adrenal glands, that cortisol balance, even different supplements like berberine to really help with blood sugar regulation and making sure that that's all in order. If blood sugar is off, like it really affects so many other things down the line. It can really cause some severe fatigue. And so if we can address that, all's the better. I also recommend creatine to a lot of folks. Creatine has been thought of as like, well, you only take creatine if you're a bodybuilder, like you're in the gym all the time and you're just trying to like get ripped and build a bunch of muscle, which is not untrue. But also, what's interesting about creatine is that folks who are fatigued, who experience depression, actually are found to have lower levels of creatine in their central nervous system. And it's thought that, or even if they don't have lower levels of it, it's thought that they, through research, it's been found, I should say, that they have a harder time making use of the energy that's in their central nervous system. So everything may be working fine, like they're, everything's where it needs to be. They have all the nutrients they need to have. They just can't pull the resource and make use of it. And so we add in creatine, and that can be so, so helpful for folks just to help them get their energy back up and moving. So those are sort of the general supplements that I recommend for folks in terms of energy and fatigue. I have put together a storefront page, so you can go check them out. And if you're interested, purchase them. These are all available over the counter. But those are some things that I definitely recommend with folks and see benefit from them, which is why I continue to recommend them. Of course, as I have said so many times, please, please, please talk to a licensed and qualified medical provider in your area who can talk to you about your specific case and what's going on with you, so that you can get the treatment that is right for you in your circumstance.